Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague from Washington, D.C., Caroline Malone. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Tanvi. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C., and 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we have more on the US Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity and concern over a strong start to the hurricane season in the Atlantic. But first, the headlines.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi says his government has followed the policy of justice for all and appeasement to none, blames the Congress party of trying to bring chaos in the country. Stampede at Hathras in India's Uttar Pradesh claims over 50 lives. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expresses condolences, assures all help. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban asks Ukrainian President Zelensky to consider ceasefire to speed up peace talks as Hungary takes over EU's rotating presidency on Monday. And World Meteorological Organization warns Hurricane Beryl has strengthened to a Category 5 storm, setting the tone for a very dangerous hurricane season. So our first news from India. On Tuesday, both houses of India's parliament resumed discussion on the motion of thanks on the president's address. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi replied in the lower house on the motion of thanks to the president's address. The Indian Prime Minister stated that his party campaigned on a promise to build a developed India, Viksit Bharat, or prosperous India, and the citizens have supported this vision by guiding his party a landslide victory in the elections.
इस चुनाव में हम जनता के बीच एक बड़े संकल्प के साथ देश की जनता के पास आशीर्वाद मांगने के लिए गए थे और हमने आशीर्वाद मांगा था विकसित भारत के हमारे संकल्प के लिए। हमने विकसित भारत के निर्माण के लिए एक प्रतिबद्धता के साथ, एक शुभ निष्ठा के साथ जन सामान्य का कल्याण करने के इरादे से हम गए थे। जनता ने विकसित भारत के संकल्प को 4 चांद लगा करके हमें फिर से एक बार विजयी बना करके देश की जनता की सेवा करने का मौका दिया है।
The Prime Minister of India also spoke about how the country has suffered due to appeasement politics for a long time. He said his government has chosen to prioritize satisfaction over appeasement.
इस देश ने लंबे अरसे तक तुष्टीकरण की राजनीति भी देखी। इस देश ने लंबे अरसे तक तुष्टीकरण का गवर्नेंस का मॉडल भी देखा। देश ने पहली बार सेक्युलरिज्म का एक पूरा हमने जो प्रयास किया और वो हमने तुष्टीकरण नहीं, संतुष्टीकरण और संतुष्टीकरण के विचार को लेकर के हम चले हैं। और जब हम संतुष्टीकरण की बात करते हैं तो इसका मतलब है कि हर योजना का सैचुरेशन, गवर्नेंस की आखिरी व्यक्ति तक पहुंचने की हमारी जो संकल्पना है, इसको परिपूर्ण करना। और जब हम सैचुरेशन के सिद्धांत को लेकर चलते हैं, तब सैचुरेशन सच्चे अर्थ में सामाजिक न्याय होता है। सेक्युलेशन सच्चे अर्थ में सेक्युलरिज्म होता है और उसी को देश की जनता ने हमें तीसरी बार बिठा करके मोहर लगा दी है।
In some unfortunate news coming from the country, in a tragic incident, over 50 people died and several others injured in a stampede at a religious gathering in Hathras in North Indian state of Uttar Pradesh. State Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath has ordered district administration to expedite relief efforts. A high-level committee has also been constituted to inquire into the cause of the incident. Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced an ex gratia of 2 lakh Indian rupees for the next of kin of each deceased in the mishap. The injured would be given 50,000 rupees. While addressing the lower house of parliament, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also extended his condolences to those who lost their lives.
यूपी के हाथरस में जो भगदड़ हुई उसमें अनेकों लोगों की दुखद मृत्यु होने की जानकारी आ रही है। जिन लोगों की इस हादसे में जान गई है, मैं उनके प्रति अपनी संवेदना व्यक्त करता हूं। मैं सभी घायलों के जल्द से जल्द ठीक होने की कामना करता हूं। राज्य सरकार की देखरेख में प्रशासन राहत और बचाव कार्य में जुटा हुआ है।
On to the America now. In a big relief for Donald Trump, the US Supreme Court ruled that he enjoys some immunity from prosecution as former president. Donald Trump described the decision court major victory. The Democrats, on the other hand, decried the ruling. My colleague Caroline Malone is in Washington, D.C. She takes it forward from me here, gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Caroline, over to you now.
Thanks, Tanvi. So yes, the top US court delivered that landmark decision on Monday, ruling that the country's former president, Donald Trump, cannot be held criminally liable for official acts carried out while he was leader. It establishes a precedent for presidential immunity from prosecution. The court ruled 6-3 that Trump has immunity from prosecution for acts carried out in an official capacity, but not for private actions. Well, Trump is accused of trying to overturn the last election in a criminal case that's now on hold until lower courts decide what constitutes an official act. Well, US President Joe Biden has criticized the Supreme Court's ruling, calling it a dangerous precedent and a disservice to the American people.
Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone.
In France, leaders from the left-wing and centrist parties remain hopeful of defeating the far-right groups in the second round of polls on July the 7th. President Emmanuel Macron's Resistance Party came in third in the last vote, trailing behind left-wing and far-right groups. The left-wing coalition has said it will withdraw its candidates in districts where they finished third to support other stronger candidates who are opposed to the national rally. Well, according to local media estimates, over 180 candidates have confirmed that they will not stand in Sunday's second round of the election. The leader of France's far-right National Rally Party, Marine Le Pen, is optimistic, though, about securing an absolute majority after making significant gains in the June 30th election.
Of course, we cannot accept to go into the government if we cannot act. What our voters ask is to change the policies that were put in place. If we cannot change them, and if we accept to go into the government just to sit down on the minister's chair, If we cannot act, that would be, for me, the worst betrayal we can do to our voters.
Well, for more, we can go to DD India's correspondent Ross Cullen, who reports from Paris.
Technically, the opposition could get 280 seats. Marine Le Pen's National Rally could also get 280 seats. That would take them to 560, and the total number of MPs in France's lower house is 577. Now, it's unlikely that we would see such a mathematical breakdown of how the parties end up eventually after the decisive second round in terms of their number of MPs. But it is possible at the moment. That's why Marine Le Pen has called on all her campaigners, her canvassers, her candidates to keep up the pressure and to try to ensure that they can win a majority. She has reiterated again today that the National Rally Party leader, Jordan Bardella, will not take up the post of Prime Minister unless her party has won a majority. They know that it would be very tough for him to be Prime Minister with a relative majority, not with a full majority. Policies could be blocked, he would be vulnerable to no confidence votes, and there will be a lot of pressure on him and the party. So she has called on her campaigners to make sure they can get over the line and win an absolute majority.
Well, trailing in the race to win the UK's July 4th election, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has reached out to voters as he campaigned at a retail distribution centre. Sunak has urged voters on the political right to stick with his Conservative Party, saying that a Labour victory would be bad for the country and its democracy. Opinion polls have consistently given Keir Starmer's led Labour Party a significant lead over the Conservatives.
We're campaigning with a positive case to take to the electorate all about change. And what a contrast to the increasingly desperate negative campaign that the Tories are running. They've literally got nothing to say to the electorate as we go into Thursday. We've got plenty to say, because this campaign is about change, it's about turning the page and rebuilding our country. Whether you're a business that's been struggling locally and across the country with the damage that's been done to the economy.
Well, let's go live now to DD India's Stuart Smith, who joins us from London. So, Stuart, we're only a few days away from this election, and there's been some concern that postal ballots will not be received in time for the election.
Yeah, that's right. These are really important in the UK. In previous elections, 1/5 of all eligible votes have been postal votes. This year it's expected that will be 1/4 of all votes. And yet we're hearing this week reports from people who have elected to vote by post that their ballots are not arriving. They haven't arrived in time. The deadline for proxy voting has already passed. So there are reportedly thousands of people who are concerned they will not be able to cast a vote in this election. According to the Telegraph, a newspaper here in the UK, that's happening across 90 constituencies, and it's massive cause for alarm for the opposition, but also for the government. It's calling for an inquiry and says it's urgently investigating. It's called on Royal Mail, the UK Postal Service, to do all it can to get these ballot papers to people before Thursday, when they have to arrive at the various sorting offices. But Royal Mail earlier in the day has said it's not actually anything to do with them. They claim that they are delivering the postal votes as soon as they arrive in their network, that there is no backlog, and they remain confident that postal votes will make it to the places they need to be by the deadlines, as long as Royal Mail receives it in time. And what seems to be what's happening here is the Postal Service says the local councils that are meant to be arranging these ballots are at fault. They have not got their ballots sent in time, which means they're not arriving at voters' addresses in time. So both the Local Government Association and the UK's Postal Service calling for an inquiry and potentially a revised timetable for future elections, with more and more voters each year using the postal vote system.
We'll have to see what happens over the next couple of days. Thank you, Stuart. Stuart Smith reporting live from London. Well, Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, who has just taken up the presidency of the Council of the EU, held talks with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv on Tuesday. Hungarian officials have said they discussed the possibility of a ceasefire, The ties between the two neighbouring countries have come under strain since the Russian-led Ukraine conflict began.
In general, the content of our dialogue on all of today's issues could serve as a basis for a future bilateral document between our countries, a document that will regulate all of our relations that could be based on a reciprocal approach regarding bilateral relations between Hungary and Ukraine, that will allow our people to benefit from blessings of European unity.
We would like to make the relationship between the two countries better. We would like to make a broad bilateral agreement with Ukraine, similar to the ones we already made with our neighbors. We would be happy to take part in the modernization of Ukraine's economy. We would like an ordered framework for this.
Well, it's been an unusually fierce start to the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season as Beryl has strengthened into a Category 5 storm. The World Meteorological Organization says that the strength of this hurricane is setting the tone for a potentially dangerous hurricane season. DD India's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Category 5 means Beryl is now pounding the Caribbean with winds of more than 250 kilometres an hour. And with that, it's causing incredible damage, sweeping away houses and destroying infrastructure. So far, it's passed through Grenada and St Vincent and the Grenadines. There, many are now without power, and the Prime Minister of St Vincent and the Grenadines has described immense destruction on several islands, adding that around 90% of the houses have been either severely damaged or simply destroyed. Beryl is the earliest Category 5 hurricane to be recorded in the Atlantic, and the strongest to hit the area this early in the hurricane season. The World Meteorological Organization is therefore warning that Beryl is setting a very dangerous tone for the upcoming hurricane season, saying it sets a precedent for what the WMO fears is going to be a very, very, very active, very dangerous hurricane season in the Atlantic. According to scientists, the early timing and strength of the hurricane is linked to warmer ocean temperatures. The storm will now continue its path and is expected to hit Jamaica on Wednesday before moving on to the Cayman Islands later in the week, before reaching the coast of Mexico at the Yucatan Peninsula by the weekend. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Back to you in the studio, Tanvi.
Thank you, Caroline. Caroline Malone joining us from Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. Violence breaks out again in Nairobi, Kenya, after call for more demonstrations and resignation of President William Ruto. Relations between Paris, Berlin and Warsaw would remain strong despite far-right's gains in France, says German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on a visit to Poland.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked, we just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. On to Africa now. Protests in Kenya's capital Nairobi continued on Tuesday and other cities across the country, with protesters demanding the resignation of President William Ruto. The protests follow a week of deadly clashes over a $2.7 billion of tax hikes in a proposed finance bill. DD India's Leon Senyenge reports from Kampala.
Kenyan police fired tear gas at protesters in the capital Nairobi on Tuesday as protesters have remained unrelenting in their demands. They are demanding changes in what they have described as rampant corruption and governance under President Ruto. They are also demanding that the president steps down. The protests have since expanded into a national movement. Hundreds of protesters in the coastal city of Mombasa were also reported to have staged demonstrations. There were protests in other towns of Kajiado, Kisumu, as well as Nakuru. An internet outcry against the roughly $2.7 billion in tax increases in a planned finance bill sparked the protests last week. Kenya's National Commission on Human Rights says at least 39 people have so far died in the protests. Leon Senyange reporting in Kampala, Uganda for DD India.
Back to Asia. A Pakistani court granted temporary bail to Bushra Bibi, the wife of former Prime Minister Imran Khan, in a corruption case on Tuesday, according to ARY News. Bushra Bibi and Khan are accused of receiving illicit financial assistance from a land developer for the establishment of Al-Qadir University, which they both deny. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel won't stop the war in Gaza before achieving all of its goals. He was referring to an article in a US daily quoting security officials saying Israel's military leadership wants a ceasefire with Hamas if a bigger war breaks on its northern front with Lebanon. Israel is under pressure from Washington to end the loss of human life and wind down its military offensive after nearly 9 months, but does not want Hamas in charge of Gaza after the war.
Unnamed officials are briefing the New York Times today. They say Israel will be willing to end war before achieving all of its goals. I don't know who those unnamed officials are, but I am here to convey unequivocally that this is not going to happen. We will end the war only after we achieve all of its goals, including the elimination of Hamas and release of all our hostages.
And now we take a look at other stories making news around the world. The Netherlands has a new Prime Minister after 14 years as King William Alexander swore in the country's new government on Tuesday. Although Geert Wilders' anti-immigration party won the most seats in last year's elections, it took over 7 months to form a government. During their meeting in Warsaw, Poland, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk committed to jointly ensuring the security of Europe's borders amid heightened tensions with Belarus and Russia's ongoing attacks on Ukraine, which have led to frequent NATO deployments in Poland. Olaf Scholz also added that relations between Paris, Berlin and Warsaw would remain strong despite the far-right National Rally Party's historic gains in France. The US government has imposed trade restrictions on 6 companies, citing their involvement in training China's military. The companies located in China, South Africa, the UAE and the UK have been added to the US's restricted entity list, according to an official notice. Sri Lanka's cabinet has approved the construction of 934 rainwater harvesting tanks in Jaffna district by the Indian government on Tuesday. An MOU was signed between the two countries in January 2017 to construct 3,000 rainwater harvesting tanks to provide clean drinking water in Jaffna. In October 2022, 1,831 PVC rainwater tanks were installed. Now the remaining funds will be utilized to construct the 934 tanks. Considering the poor quality of drinking water in entire Jaffna Peninsula, India had agreed to the request of Sri Lankan government to construct 3,000 tanks in the Jaffna district. Next, a story from Bolivia. Cyclists in the country took part in the La Paz Challenge downhill, where they faced a variety of terrains, steps and extreme ramps. The competition starts at 4,069 meters above sea level and finishes at 3,440 meters above sea level. With a length of 4.57 kilometers, competitors considered the race lives up to its name by being a hard challenge. So that's all for this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at DD India Live, and also you can download our DD India mobile app. So that's it in this broadcast. News and updates continue on our channel. We'll be back as news breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.